Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Plugged In podcast. We are so glad that you were with us. Hope you all have enjoyed the first couple episodes that have already been out. And if you haven't checked those out, make sure you go back, you check those out. We had a lot of fun with them, and just super glad to have my man Noah back here.
Good to be back, man.
It's going to be awesome. Today, we're going to kind of build off of the first episode of what it really means to be plugged in. And we talked about a lot of those things. We talked about how you can trace it back to the source and how it will produce like this light. I talked about lamps a lot, right? And so like even within it, it was like, okay, it will produce this. And I think a lot of times though, you have to define the direction you're wanting to go. You have to define the things you're wanting to do. You have to define really what God already has said to do. And so a lot of times though, like we don't really think about it. So today we're going to be hitting on some healthy habits, some holy habits, and some spiritual disciplines. So it's going to be a lot of fun, but we'll go ahead, jump in, kind of dive into it. And what are some of the habits that in your life that you've seen that you've really had to work hard at?
There's plenty there. I would like to say I love that you mentioned direction, because even we were talking not too long ago, I'm like, discipline and direction is what I'm trying to focus on right now in life. And I think those two together is way more important than the destination. It's funny. Sometimes I think the alliterations and the 4Ds and 4Cs is it just, they always pop up. But anyways, disciplines, habits, kind of synonymous there. A lot of the hardest ones for me are the ones that require me to step outside of my natural tendencies or strengths. And I think even in the spiritual formation standpoint, those disciplines of, like if you were to take the spiritual gifts test, right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of them that I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty low. Whether it's generosity or, I'm just not one. I'm more naturally just kind of introverted, do my thing. I love serving people, in my unique ways, but when those times of being more listening to God for those moments, to be generous and to, especially in uncomfortable ways where it's like a tough, like you want to have a conversation with someone and it's inconvenient or this and that. So it's kind of a broad stroke there of what's been difficult, but it's the ones outside of my natural.
I think that's what's so beautiful too, is like you have your strengths and like it's awesome whenever you were able to use those strengths for the healthy habits and in your relationship with Jesus and looking more like Jesus and following him and showing people Jesus. Like that's awesome. But for me, and I'm the same way, because it's crazy because I talk a lot, right? Like especially if I know you, like, I talk a lot, like, and I love people and I'm pretty extroverted. However, whenever I don't know people, I get a little bit more timid and introverted. And I'd say majority of the people are kind of like that. Now there's some people who are like, never meet a stranger. And
Right.
A lot of people say that even about me, but I don't meet a stranger if someone introduces me to them. Like I'm not very good at just going up to people. And it's one area where I have to stretch. But I think what's beautiful about it within those things is reminding ourselves of God's word of when we're weak, he is strong. And even in our weaknesses, he shines through even more, simply because a lot of times I find myself, if I'm good at something, just as human nature, I think a lot of times we take credit for it. So like it almost takes that and it shows God in your weakness. It shows him in all that you do. So even with those habits, what are some that you have seen that aren't necessarily the hardest, but just are really impactful for you, your family, just in your everyday life?
Yeah, I think kind of to set the stage for the habits is kind of the just the concept of routines or rhythms, right? Because then you have those times, which we all know the middle of the day is like a tornado oftentimes. So a book that really changed my life on the concept of habits, it's not a Christian writer, but it's Atomic Habits by James Clear, and he talks about habit stacking. And like you have this chain of, you have enough space to where you can stack healthy habits on top of each other. And for most of us, that's evening and morning, or one or the other, right? So if you're an evening person after the kids go to bed, or depending on your studying. And for me, the morning is my time to, before anybody else is up, I can focus on the healthy things,
Yeah.
mind, body, soul, right? So I try to think in terms of areas,
Yeah.
and just like, what are the small levers I could pull that over time would amount to a lot. And so like on a body standpoint, I'm not the best at it, but I'm finally trying to work out 2 to 3 times a week. Soul, it's like scripture and prayer, like we can't get past the basics. And for me, prayer is one I don't know if I've met anybody that says I'm great at prayer. Like I'm just killing it in the prayer habit. But that's one I really want to grow in. Like it shouldn't be hard, but I know both individually, but also with my wife, me and a friend of mine, we try to pray regularly together. Like we try to pray for each other. Even sometimes when we're there sitting together at the end of a conversation, like bringing God into it, I think it creates more of that intentionality around the main thing in our life, and that's Christ and all that we do.
I think that's really, really good too, just simply because a lot of times it's easy to get overwhelmed by like these big goals and like the habits you have to do to reach this goal. And it can be intimidating a lot of times. And what happens is, oh, I can't do that. So you do nothing at all. And so, what are the small areas? And I really like that of going, yeah, I have this lever here, this lever here, this lever here. And really, it's one of those things where it's hard. Like habits are hard. So creating it, it's okay to go, man, I'm not very good at this. Man, I'm kind of struggling with this. But don't stop. Continue, because one day it will just become a habit. Like we all have habits. It's just, are you going to be intentional with them?
Yes.
We all have habits. And like, for instance, if I were to ask you, hey, what were you doing last Wednesday morning? Like, what was your morning like? Could you tell me what your morning was like?
It's pretty predictable. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I can't remember a lot of stuff from yesterday, let alone last week. I could tell you what happened that morning simply because I do it like every morning.
And you can tell what direction that's pointing in.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is great.
And so I think that a lot of times it's just that intentionality that takes place. And really even who's pouring into you. Like for me, I have habits today that were instilled by my parents. They told me, hey, make sure you brush your teeth morning and night. I brush my teeth morning and night. Like it's just one of those things that it happened. Now, you also know as kids, like you don't like brushing your teeth at all. Like I don't know why, but it's like you don't like it. However, it's one of those things that becomes a habit because you see it's good for you. And I think that a lot of times we need to realize that these habits, while they're hard, and they're good for you. And there is something about that is so much deeper. But within this, I like that you hit on prayer there. Man, prayer changed my life drastically. Not perfect at it, like you said. I don't know really anyone who's like, man, my prayer life, it's like the best of the best.
Yeah.
You know what
I feel like you have a story here.
Yeah, and but for me, prayer changed everything. It was one of those things to where I kind of wondered what it was like to pray without ceasing. I never really dove into that. And for me personally, honestly, prayer opened up a friendship with God that I never knew I could have. It was me talking to him whenever I was upset, angry, like we talked about before. Real recognizes real. I was real with God. The more real I was with him, the more real he became to me. And our relationship just grew exponentially. And I truly felt like he was my friend. And like it was just beautiful even within that. So I think even that outlook of what it can do for you in your relationship with Christ, what it can do for you in your relationship with your family, what it can do for you in your relationship with your friends, whatever it looks like, man, there is something powerful about habits. And with talking about prayer, it makes me think of Daniel, right? And I know we had talked about it previously, but whenever I think about these habits, I do think about Daniel. I think about his prayer life.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things to where, and I'll pull it up here real quick, see if I can. Yeah, there we go. Daniel 6:10, it dives in. It's after the fact that these people were setting Daniel up, right? And they couldn't find anything on him. They're like, man, I don't even know how to trip him up. Like, I don't know. They could look at me in my life and probably be like, "Oh, I can trip this dude up here." But that's another conversation. However, they started going, okay, what does he do? And they knew his habits.
Mm-hmm.
They knew what his habits were by the life he lived. He didn't hide his habits. He was public about them. And I think a lot of times Christians, a lot of people don't know we're Christians because we don't show Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
We don't show how we follow Jesus. But they saw that with Daniel. So it's like, how can we trip him up? All right, we know that he prays. He's public about it. And I know for me, even whenever I was younger, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, are we praying before we eat? Like in the restaurant? Like, what are people going to think? You know what I'm saying?
You wait till no one's looking and you do a little quick one.
Exactly.
Pray with your eyes open.
Yeah. But with that though, he was public about it. And so they set him up, and it says here in Daniel 6:10, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, so he knew about it. He knew about the decree. He knew about the law that was set up. He went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem 3 times a day. 3 times. 3 times a day. He got down on his knees and he prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before.
Mm.
So he had done it before.
Yeah.
It was a habit.
Yeah.
Prayer was a habit, and it was 3 times a day.
I don't know if I ever caught that before.
I think it's beautiful that it's that specific too, because it reminds me of habit stacking. It makes me think he probably had something that he did before he prayed in the morning.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
There's a trigger. Yeah.
Exactly. Because there are cues like in your life for habits.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Yeah. So I'll let you dive in.
Think about what fruit grows on a trellis, the concept of a trellis. Like I love that as an image for spiritual disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
A trellis is a system. It's a structure that allows growth to happen, and it reduces the amount of the weeds and death that comes across that plant.
Wow.
And so, I mean, fruit is all over the Bible. We all want to say we want to be fruitful. What does it take to get there? And it requires that dependency. If, the vine and the branch, you can do nothing apart from me. But we are to act, and we are to. Scripture lays out so many things of just so many things that we don't need to get lost in the so many things. Yeah. But there are those essentials. And I like that you mentioned in the story of Daniel, you think about how it was identity based around who he was. If we start with the identity, that's in Atomic Habits as well. Like you say, it's the difference between I'm trying to stop smoking. A smoker says that, right?
Yeah.
Versus I'm not a smoker. So therefore, I'm not going to smoke.
Wow.
One, you're just trying not to do an action. The other, you're like, no, that's not who I am. And then every time you do it, it's a token to reinforce that identity.
Wow, that's really good. I never thought about it. Yeah. Is that in that book? I haven't read the book.
Yeah, you got to check it out, the visuals in there. And then last thing alongside that is I just think of the depth of the relationship in prayer, right? So I've heard it said like building relationships can kind of fall in 4 pillars. Like a deep relationship is see if I can remember them, but it's duration, it's frequency, right? So how long in those times you're together, it's depth, and it's proximity. So I just think those are really 4 helpful buckets to think of just in our walk with God, but with other people. And you just think about, there's plenty of people you can probably think of, like I see them all the time, but we're just kind of acquaintances.
Yeah.
It hasn't gone past like weather, sports. And it's no different with God. We want to have that depth. So like, he knows it all, right? So are we meeting him there and talking to that in those things? Yeah,
that's really good. And I love that you bring up depth there as well, because I think a lot of times like people say, I want to go deeper with my faith. But the reality is you're not even doing the things that you consider surface level. And so it's like, so what do you really mean by deeper? And I think that it's really, really important to notice that small habits can make big differences. But it starts with the small habits. And it's like we have gotten so used to hearing things about, yeah, pray, read your Bible. Like it's almost like a habit to answer that, but not do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's become a habit just to, yeah, I want to go deeper. Okay, so how's your prayer life? Well, yeah, I know about prayer. No, I didn't ask if you knew about it. How's your prayer life?
Yeah.
Like, what's it look like?
Yeah.
Because if you want to go deeper, you got to start digging.
Yeah.
So, like, it's one of
Take
those
some
things.
effort.
Exactly. And like I said before, it's hard,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, it is hard.
Let me ask you a question on that, because I've been there. I've heard it. People I know, it's like, I don't want it to be a chore to read the Bible.
Yeah.
So we wait for it to not feel like a chore.
Yeah.
What would you say to that when someone's stuck in that? Like they realize that it's hard, but they don't think it should feel hard, or it shouldn't feel like a chore. There's some, I want it to be genuine. There's that wrapped up into there, but what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, one, kind of like with the cues, I would say, uh, don't let it just be a check in the box.
Mm.
And a lot of people will be like, "Oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I've heard it so much. I just don't want it to be a check in the box." And I've heard pastors, "Hey, don't just let it be a check in the box." However, it has to start somewhere. And I'm perfectly fine with it being a check in the box, because what I do at the end of my day is go, okay, what boxes were checked? What weren't? Man, I really need to grow here.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that you have an alarm to wake up. Is it bad? Like, did you have an alarm to wake you up? Oh, I should just want to wake up. It's good for me. I should want to wake up. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but you have an alarm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay to have a reminder
Yes.
about being in God's word and in prayer, because at the end of the day,
We are sheep.
exactly. And who are we following?
Yeah, the shepherd.
So you look to him. So
we
you gotta
need
remind
that
us
we need that little staff tap. You know?
exactly,
I don't know.
exactly. And that's one of those things, though, that a lot of times I think the enemy wants to do that, and go, yeah, you should just want to. At the end of the day, I'm a sinner.
Mm-hmm.
I've been forgiven by God's grace, but I'm a sinner. It's not natural, and hopefully it does become, but it's not natural for me to go, you know what? I want to be holy today. Like,
Yeah.
I want this. But a lot of times we fall into our fleshly desires. We do what feels good,
Mm-hmm.
rather than what is good. And
Mhm.
because we're so based off of feelings. So I would say it's perfectly fine. And I would encourage you, go ahead, start making some boxes and start checking them off. Like, that's fine to check those off and have that quiet time with God. And before you know it, it'll just be a habit. It's what you do.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's what I'd really
I
say
love
there. What
that.
about you?
Um, what was the? Yeah, I would say something along the same lines. I had this conversation not too long ago, and I think it always comes back to consecration for me. It's like, God, take my impure desires right now. Like,
Yeah.
I'm being honest. Like, I don't feel a desire to open this up. It feels like a chore mentally, whether I'm tired or what. But I'm gonna give it to you, and at least I'm like leaving it in your hands to help work your spirit in me, because of my flesh that's in the way oftentimes from that. But and I feel like, as just over the past, just in my 20s, I feel like it's more and more like there's plenty of times where I'd be like, if you just went off of how I felt, then I would say I've regressed, or I haven't spiritually matured compared to when I felt on fire, when it felt
Yeah.
like I was just feeling God all the time. It's like, praise God for that. But also, like, I feel like there's so much to learn in the meeting Him in the lack of desire, and He can meet you there.
Yeah.
And I think it just comes back to giving it to Him, and taking the reps, knowing who you're becoming like, and that it's based in the relationship. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I
for
mean?
sure. This just popped into my head, and I at least hope some of y'all watch The Office. If you do, drop your favorite quote or episode in the comments. Like, I'm just curious, just because I love The Office.
Now I have to know yours, but maybe at a later time.
Oh, mine is a sad one. It makes me cry. That Andy, wish you knew you were in the good old days.
Oh,
Or-
yeah. Feels.
Yeah.
Made you feel.
Yeah. Anyways, good old days right here.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But it made me think of Jim and Dwight. And whenever Jim, he always gave him like a mint
Mm-hmm.
at that certain time. And then before you knew it, and Dwight's reaching for a mint and he's like, oh, what's that bad taste in my mouth? And I think that even with our relationship with God, with our habits, it should be that.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, it starts as that. And it's, yeah, I'm checking the box. Yeah, I'm doing it. Yeah, I'm doing it. And before you know it, you forget about it and it's a habit. But whenever you miss it, you notice it.
Mm.
And so it's
Yeah.
like, oh, what is that? Like, I don't feel full. Like, I feel different. Something's missing. And so it's one of those things to where it should be created to where you crave it, you want it, you
Yes.
miss it, you need it,
Yes.
and you see the impact it has on your life.
Yes. Because it's not just doing the thing is why you do it or because it's familiar. There's a bigger picture there, and I think that's where I think of another person here, and this is me many times. It's like I've fallen in love. I love the idea of habits. I love productivity. I love the idea, but it's like, what do I actually love there? I love feeling good about myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I love the idea of being someone that's at that level. But I need to be more focused on becoming and being in relationship, like marriage. It always got so many parallels with marriage,
yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
like I had to apologize to my wife not too long ago because I was talking to someone and he shared his story with me. I was like, whoa, that's me. I said, I apologize to you for loving more the idea of the marriage we should have
Wow.
versus taking the action to be the man that will get us there.
Wow.
And it's intimacy, it's
Wow.
sacrifice, and before you know it, you're reacting because we're not there, and I'm not even doing the work, the habits
Yeah.
that look like dying to myself to get there. And it was so convicting, bro. It was a
Exactly.
moment like
Yeah.
that is those wake up moments when you realize, and then that just brought life to habits for me from
Yeah.
in a relational standpoint. But
That's really, really good. It kind of makes me think of like the reason why we don't do habits so often is because we want to stay comfortable and just the everyday routines. And it's funny that our comfortability will make us complain, but we never change it because it's way too uncomfortable. All right.
but it's familiar, baby.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll
It's
take
like,
familiar.
oh, yeah, I'm used to that. And even like with me, I love I love food. Y'all.
Amen.
Oh, I love some good food, right? And so what I do a lot of times is I know for instance, my dude Mason back here behind the
Shout out to
camera.
Mason.
That's right. Shout out Mason. Shout out Michael. Shout out Caleb in here, making all this
The gang.
beautiful stuff happen. But I know with Mason, for instance, he is a lot like my wife Abby in the sense of they are a little bit picky with food, right? So like I could almost
Fine taste, right?
guarantee that wherever I go, I could pick out something that Mason likes because he likes chicken tenders. That's what I know he likes. He likes some chicken tenders. He likes canes, and he's ready to go. That is it right there. And for me though, and it's familiar, right? And it's almost as if, and I know it's different whenever it's coming to that because yeah, some stuff just don't taste good to you, right? And that's, but as far as like in your walk with Christ or coming in with new habits, for me, whenever I go to a restaurant, I go, "What's the best thing you have?" All right, what do you think? And just because I'm unfamiliar with the place, but I'm gonna trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that a lot of times with the unfamiliar things, I think a lot of times we shouldn't run to our comfortability, but run to Christ and go, "Hey, what's best? Hey, what is it that I should have? Hey, I trust you. You know what's good for me."
Mm-hmm.
And so like I think it's one of those things too that with your habits, it takes trust.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you're not going to see it immediately. Like it's like, man, I want my marriage to be here. I
Yeah.
want my relationship with my boyfriend or girlfriend to be here. I want my friendships to be here. I want to be deeper in my relationship with Christ here. And we want it how we want it, when we want it. And that's not how it works.
Yeah. Think about anything. Think about where you are now, like, and the path that it took to get you there. Think about any area of life. You're like, would you have ever scripted that out?
Wow.
No.
Yeah. That's
And
good.
you think about, did you shared vulnerably recently, just like on the pains
Yeah.
that have you all have endured and has created intimacy
Yeah.
with God as you now get ready to welcome new life.
Yeah.
And you never would have scripted that, nor would you have chosen that.
No.
Praise God, we have grace to endure, right?
Exactly.
And I think we want the grace before to know that we'll endure, right? But I love that you hit on comfort and certainty, because I'm kind of like working this out. For the longest time, I've always just loved the idea of getting to the place where you're comfortable with the uncomfortable,
Yeah.
or like you're uncomfortable that you're comfortable, right? So
Yeah.
like, because you know growth, you know I need to grow in all areas of life, right? But I think what we like to do is ping pong between certainty and control, and complacency and comfort. And the way you said that, I was like, oh, I guess when we want certainty, sometimes we'll go into hyper control mode. Sometimes we'll go into passive mode because it puts us in that familiar seat.
Yeah.
And what is, like, look at the story of Elijah. That's what I've just been reading recently, is Elijah was somewhere in the middle where he was spirit led. You look at the world, like there's evil spirits leading the control and the lusts of the world and the pleasures and this and that. Elijah was that middle Holy Spirit. Like I think that's what his name means, like led by God. And he was assertive, but it was that balance of love and truth that we talk about. And I don't know. I'm wrestling with that middle ground of assertiveness, facing discomfort because you're reliant on the Spirit of God, and you're willing to face hard things and hard conversations, hard relationships, hard scenarios where you stand up to share the truth.
Yeah.
You don't just lay back in passivity because I don't want to rock the boat.
Exactly. And I think that's why habits are so important, because habits just happen. Honestly, like whenever you think about control, whenever it's a habit, it's really less control and it's more comfort, right? Yeah. So they just kind of happen like naturally. And I want what I do naturally to be healthy.
Yeah.
I want it to be good. I want it to look more like Jesus than it does myself. I want that naturally. We're all Christians becoming more like Christ, right? As Christians, we're supposed to become like him. So I want my life to look like him. And so like, even within that, a lot of times I think what happens is you go, my habits don't really matter. They're not that big of a deal. And I actually have this statistic here. It says over 40% of the actions that you do on a daily basis are not the result of decisions, but a result of a habit. So you're not even deciding to do it.
Cause you to think back when you're looking at the end result. Right?
Exactly.
Like, I don't like that.
Exactly. And so I want to make sure, hey, I'm going to have a check in the box because I want to know what I'm doing so it gives honor to God. Not because I want control of the outcome, but I do want self-control. There's a big difference. And so like, even like you're not trying to play God, but you want to become more like him.
Yeah.
And so that idea of I'm going to be intentional about my habits so that I look more like him. Yeah. And I'll let you jump in there.
No, I love that. I mean, I'm just kind of thinking like, okay, practically, right? Yeah. How do you get practical with it? How do you not get overwhelmed with all this? Because I do think we like to put people on a pedestal.
Yeah.
Or ourselves on a pedestal. Like, oh, we're actually like make ourselves think we're doing better than we are so that we don't have to make change. Yeah. Or we put people down or ourselves down. And like,
at least I'm not that.
I could never be like that, or at least I'm not that.
Yeah.
And so then we stay in the comfortable, right? So I think real practically, I have a couple ideas here. I'll share one, and then maybe we could riff on what does it look like to just keep it simple, keep the motives pure with all of it. Yeah. Right. And I think that consecration is always the top of my list, prayerfully, right? As you're trying to adopt something new. And keeping it, what's the identity I need to work on here? Like the piece of my identity where I may be off on who I am in Christ. And then from there, I'm just going to add one thing. Recently, I've been trying to like kind of jot down things as I do them in the day. And then you look back and you're like, whoa. It's kind of like to your last point. Do that. Try that for a day or a week. Like just pull out a journal. It doesn't have to be all fine detailed, but like write down the stuff as you do it. by the hour or whatever. And then you look back and you can kind of see, oh, I do have habits that I
Yeah.
may not even realize. No pressure on like making it into something. Just do your work, do your thing, write it down. And I think it's very telling. And then you can assess from there.
Yeah, that's really good. I have a couple things with that. Um, one, uh, one thing that I've been told as I'm about to become a dad is you will look back and go, "Whoa, what did I do with all that time?" And so I think it's important.
I haven't found an answer for that.
I
We
don't
don't
think
remember what we
anybody
did.
has. I don't
Michael,
think
you remember what you used to do? I don't.
exactly. So like it's like, man, you will wonder that.
Yeah.
And but for me, I go, man, I wish I would have wondered that sooner. What am I doing with all my time?
Wow.
And so like even that, like I want to encourage you all, like Noah was saying, and write it down. Ask, what have I done? What have I done in the past hour? What am I getting ready to do? And so, but I think that's one thing that is kind of like that check mark as well. And kind of looking back and going, yeah, like I dropped the ball there,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm growing.
Mm.
But I'm doing this. And because what happens a lot of times too, there are so many times that I talk to people and it's like, oh, how was your day? And it's like, oh, it was all right. Or, not the greatest. Another day, and a lot of times that's more negative. And
Yeah.
what happens, I kind of fell in that boat for a little bit. I kind of did the normal habits, normal routine, wake up, go to work, eat, like,
I
and
hope
then,
it's heading somewhere good. Yeah.
yeah. And, but what I noticed was whenever I started tracking those things and actually writing it down, even on my worst days, the good outweighed the bad.
Mm.
There were more good things that happened than the bad, but a lot of times we put emphasis on the bad.
Yeah.
And so like that's even like a good thing that I know it's a little off with the habit stuff, but I think it is important to realize those things because I think one, we do put ourselves on a pedestal sometimes. And I think another side is we beat ourselves up
Yeah.
way too much.
Yes.
And, but yeah, so do you have anything else kind of with what it looks like practically? Like, what are some next steps? If I am a high school student, college student, a parent, no matter where I'm at, if I've been following Jesus for a day or 50 years, like,
Mhm.
like what are some practical steps that we could take in growing in our habits?
Yeah. I would I really want to emphasize start with the why. Because I drift from it too. But I was reading, 1 Timothy 4:7, discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness. So just reminding ourselves that discipline actually equals freedom. It's like the whole lie that we could buy in the flesh of like freedom to do whatever we want is freedom. No, it's actually bondage. It's actually
Wow.
slavery to the things you become addicted to, the unhealthy things. So remembering that it's a path to godliness and a deeper relationship with Christ. And then from there, I would say just pick one. Just pick one. I really like the idea of keystone habits. For you, it might be flossing your teeth. I've heard you can say, like, not flossing is one of the major causes of heart disease, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah,
I
I
think it was
think you're
Pastor
right.
Daniel that told me
I
that.
think you're right.
Don't quote me on that. Check with your medical doctor. But like that's insane to think about. So like, what is one habit, like a keystone type habit? We did a marriage night years ago, and it was praying with your spouse.
Yeah.
I need to get back to that with my
Yeah.
wife. So it's easy for me to fall into. I'm going to pick ones that elevate me. What are the ones that if I did that, and it's usually around like marriage or parenting, a shift in your routine so that you are more available, that can affect multiple areas, and then
Yeah.
just work on that. And I love your point where it was like, yeah, I don't think it's technically considered a habit until it's like almost like autopilot, right?
Yeah.
So then just focus on that one for a whole quarter. Like we already
Yep.
see goals as a whole, we shouldn't have more than 2 or 3 big ones for like 3 months because it's just takes a lot of time and effort. But make one of those a habit ones and think about if I did that, it would really affect a lot of areas of my life.
Yeah, and I know whenever I was in college, we actually had a class and we had a study on habits, and I don't want to misquote it. I can't remember exactly. Um, I'll look it up later and talk about it maybe in the next one. I don't know. But it was X amount of days until a habit is formed. And it was a lot longer than what I thought.
The classic 21, it's like longer than that,
Yeah.
right?
And so, like, that idea of, I was like, whoa, like, I didn't know it actually
Mhm.
took that long. So I think that that's one of those things too, to realize, like, hey, it's a process. Like, it's going to take some time, but it's worth it.
Mm.
And like, you know what it's for, going back to the godliness, like, you know
Yeah.
what it's going toward, and you know what it's um, gonna do for you, your family, so on and so forth. I think another side of it too, because I 100% agree with that. Whenever you look at the bigger picture, whenever you look at those around you, whenever you see those things, I also think that it's really, really important too, not to point the finger at other people and maybe the habits that they have,
Yeah.
simply because what happens a lot is we want to change everyone around us. Um, but we don't want to change ourselves. And so, like, a lot of people want to change the world, but they don't want to change them. And so, like, that reality of going, okay, well, how can I grow? How can I change? What are some things in my life I need to change? Go to God in prayer about it.
Yes.
Wow, starting to have it right there.
Uh, Keystone, baby. I love that.
Exactly. So,
Love
like,
that.
it's one of those things. And it kinda,
Wow.
like you said with, like, the flossing, I encourage you, and I believe this is kinda like habit stacking as well, kinda like, "Alright, I'm gonna do 1 push-up today." Whenever you get down there to do 1 push-up, more than likely, you're probably gonna do more than 1, right?
Yeah.
And it just kinda builds, and so I encourage you to just kinda be like, "Alright, I'm gonna do this today." And there is something that is so much more than a feeling whenever you do these healthy, holy habits to look more like Jesus and for godliness. And there's something more than a feeling, and it's fulfillment. And you
Mm.
notice that, and
Yep.
it goes with you throughout your day. And you go, you know what? I'm going to keep doing this, and because it goes back to what I was saying earlier, you will then notice whenever you don't have it,
Yeah.
you'll notice it.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, it's kind of anything
Yeah,
else.
it makes me think of James Clear also says it's like I'm gonna put my shoes on, right? And that's the catalyst to go to the gym. It's like getting off of the highway exit. You don't say, I'm gonna get to Florida 8 hours from here. It's like I'm gonna take that one exit. Then you're on the path and it opens up to new things. So I really like that idea um, there. And then as well, I was just thinking how important it is to remember that these habits will oftentimes lead us, position us to be pruned,
Mm,
position us
yeah,
to bring on harder things.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Pruning's
yeah,
not fun, but we
no,
all know like pruning is a part of it. So like not being attached to like, oh, then I'll have fruitful circumstances.
yeah,
Maybe yes and no, you know, seasons, right?
yeah.
So just not being attached to that, but being an activist in that and reminding yourself that grace feeds off of method and method feeds off of grace. I heard
Oh,
that
that's
once
good.
before. I don't know if that was Tim Keller, but like it puts us in position,
Yeah,
right? Puts us into position. Um, and I think the final thought on there, I just keep these concepts keep coming together, but I heard it said, abide in the thin places. I was like, what is thin places? I looked it up and I probably need a proper definition, but it's along the lines of like when your intentional choices with people, places, and practices put you in a thinner place to hear God. Like if there's not as big of a I don't know if it's a noise wall or whatever, but I need to flesh that out more. But I like that
yeah.
idea that those people, places, practices, those choices you make can put you in a better place to hear from God.
Wow,
And I think that's the fuel we need, right? We need the voice. We need that
wow.
His voice in our life. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really, really good. I like that a lot. I would like to dive deeper into
Yeah,
that too. And we may do that on another episode. I don't know, but that's really, really good. Um, and as you were talking there, I love the pruning. Um, for me, I feel like it's been a time of pruning for a while now, even in my life. And at first, pruning seems discouraging.
yeah,
And so I think it's one of those things just to encourage some of y'all who may be listening, watching, that pruning, and it's a beautiful thing. It may not look like it because things are actually getting cut off, right? And it's like, I don't know, I don't like it, and it is uncomfortable, and it don't look as good at first, and it's like, I don't know, it looked bigger and better before, and other people could see it, and like it was just prettier, and it. But what happens with pruning, more than discouraging, just to encourage you, pruning still shows that it's alive, and it's just getting healthy,
Mm,
and some of us just need to get healthy.
yeah.
And so pruning, it's a process, but it's also a posture, like you were saying. And I want to encourage you, get into the pruning posture. And whenever I think of that, what I think about is Daniel
Yeah.
and his posture, because pruning brings humility.
Because who's the fruit for? It's not,
Exactly.
what is the fruits of the Spirit, right? Love, joy,
Yep.
peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness. It's so that people can taste and see the love of Christ,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So that's there's a good point there you made.
Yeah. And
Humility.
so get into that pruning stance, get into the pruning posture, and get down on your knees like Daniel.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally showed it. He lived it
Yeah.
of what it looked like to humble yourself and go, Jesus is worth it. He knew the cost. That's what is so mind blowing to me. He knew the cost.
Literally over 300,000 people bowing down. But he's like, I'm going to pray with the window open.
Exactly. He knew. And I think that's one of the big things that I've kind of seen in my own life that I want to challenge you all with as well. Just as I know we've talked a lot here, and it can seem like a lot. And it's kind of like, I don't even know if I can do that. Even after listening to this, take it one thing at a time. One thing at a time. Like Noah had mentioned earlier, do one thing at a time. It's a process, but do something.
Yeah.
And really ask yourself, and this is what really helped me, is Jesus worth it? Is he worth it? I would almost guarantee that Daniel had those thoughts. Whoa, a lot of people are bowing down. This is the law. Whew. What happens?
Yeah.
The lion's den? So you die? Like, what? Is Jesus worth it? And he said yes. And there's something about the obedience and humility. And it's beautiful to see how God honors it.
It's trust. It goes back to
Exactly.
trust. That is the most beautiful thing I've come to know about obedience is like we obey people that we trust,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
it just brings that up. If we have an obedience problem, we may have a trust problem.
Wow. That's really good.
And yeah, I would love to hear what's one thing you're working on, if you don't mind sharing, or that you want to add, if you were to focus on one thing right now, one habit.
One habit for me, I am working on going to bed earlier. I love staying up late.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like I even worked better late. Like I would stay up and I could even do good things late. However, it was one of those things where for me, where I'm about to have a baby, I was like, one, that's one thing. Two, I wanted to go to bed with my wife and honor her and spend time with her. And those were a couple things, but then also it helped me wake up earlier
Mm-hmm.
and helped me kickstart my day in a better, healthier way. And really, what I've done, it's allowed me to start spending more time, one with God, because I was waking up a lot earlier than I was before.
Yeah.
And then, but also with my wife and
Yeah.
prioritizing my family and her and preparing to be the father I wanted to be and preparing to be the husband that I should have been already.
So
And
good.
so like that's one of the things is going to bed early. And what I've noticed is it's created more habits in me
Yeah.
that I didn't even know, or didn't even see. And it's been awesome.
That's
So,
beautiful.
yeah.
Because it's not bad to be a night owl.
Yeah.
And it's not like a 5 a.m. miracle millionaire morning routine kind of thing.
Yeah.
But certain seasons, definitely, in like marriage, and that's been a slow shift for us, even getting on the same schedule as well. But I also think about, we've been talking about, do we keep it on the weekends, right? Think about it. Well, I'm in this mode on a Friday at 10 p.m. to 12 p.m., way more in a mode to just let entertainment in.
Yeah.
But I know if I go to bed, getting up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, turning on the newest Ted Lasso doesn't really feel right. It's like, that's my time for growth, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, whoa, that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. I don't know if there's like, nothing good happens after 10 p.m. or whatever. But I just, I've seen that as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Any last words from you?
Yeah, I think for me, it does come back. I keep the power of prayer, man. It's just, it's insane. And I think that's what I want to focus on, our family. We do the dinner time thing, but especially me and my wife, like in the seasons where we were good with that, not only does it make us closer, but it puts us in unison with God's will. And that's all we want, right? I think we would all say we want to be in God's will. We want to be walking through that. And his will is hard path sometimes. And if we stay close to him together, then I think it'll give us the strength we need. So that's,
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, man, prayer, it changed my life. Like, it changed my relationship with Jesus. And if there's one thing that I could encourage you all to start doing, is exactly what Noah said. Start with prayer. Start with prayer. Start with talking to God. We love talking anyways, right? Talk to God. He's always there for you. He will listen to you. And he also knows what's best for you. Prayer is that thing that it's humbling.
Yeah.
And it's that posture. And you go to him. And it's also one of those things that helps you grow in trusting him. And so I just want to encourage you all, man, be intentional about your habits. Be intentional about your relationship with God. Go to him in prayer. Start these small things, just the small things, and just continue to do them even whenever it's hard, because it may be hard, but I promise that it is worth it. Thank you all so much just for joining us again for another episode of Plugged In. We can't wait to see you all next time.